Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David Schuringa. I'm the president of Crossroad Bible Institute and the host of your program, Crossroad Connection. Welcome. And I have with me in the studio today a very, very special guest, actually the sheriff of Kent County, Michigan. His name is Larry Stelma. Larry, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and a privilege to participate in your ministry.
Well, to have someone of your stature, a sheriff has tremendous responsibilities, tremendous amount of influence, and so we are just delighted to have you. And I feel like we're partners. You're part of law enforcement. And we're trying to, once you apprehend someone, to make it possible that they don't come back again, because you do have repeat offenders, right?
Well, we do, and we have a lot of repeat offenders. And I would say partners is probably a good way of describing our relationships. We're both after the same goal, the same objective. And that's to impact people's lives and to reduce recidivism, to bring about cultural change in our community, changing in lives, and a change of behavior. So I think we have a lot in common.
Our goal is to help people who are in prison prepare for reentry. Now, we want to do that a number of ways, in terms of work ethic, in terms of substance abuse, in terms of family. But it strikes me that, and I think I'd like to have your opinion of it and so forth, but there needs to be something deeper going on, right? Because they've made wrong choices. So how do we help them so that they don't make those same wrong choices that got them in prison or in jail in the first place?
Well, certainly the root cause of the criminal mess our society finds itself in is very complex, and I don't claim to have all of the answers. I have observations, and criminologists will argue forever as to the specific root cause, but the very bottom line is that we need to change hearts, to change behavior. The behavior may be caused from any one of a number of things, from a poor home environment to substance abuse, to mental health issues, the propensity for violence in our society, in the homes, on television, in the marketplace. I mean, the root causes are so vast, but when you boil it right down, if there's going to be a long-term change in behavior, it's going to take a change of heart. And different people's hearts are changed in different ways. Certainly from a spiritual component, that has a huge impact on the changing of a heart. And I think that's truly the only long-term solution to the dilemma that our society is facing.
Now, as myself, a Christian, I believe very strong. I agree with you, obviously, and that's what we try to do at Crossroad Bible Institute. We want to see changed people, changed hearts. But what I'm also becoming more and more impressed with is that we also have sinful systems that were created by sinful hearts that need change, in my opinion. Any truth to that?
Well, yeah, I guess that's an interesting perspective, sinful systems. And certainly democracy, as we experience it here in America, I still think is the best form of government in the world, and we're blessed and privileged to be in a democratic society. But does it get exploited? Does it get manipulated by sinful desires? Absolutely. And do laws sometimes have unintended consequences? Do good people design laws with unintended consequences? I think so. So I guess I don't want to claim that all of our problems are from sinful systems, but Certainly,
which some do, don't they?
but some of our systems have been exploited and manipulated to create sinful results.
It seems like in our society we don't have a real balance with that, huh? I mean, there are some people that they don't want to pay attention to the sinful human heart. They say, well, it's just the circumstances, it's the system, it's the man. But then others seem to think, well, our system is perfect and it's just a matter of hearts. It sounds like you want to keep a balance there.
It needs to be balanced. Unfortunately, just giving a person an education, just giving a person a job, just convincing someone on their own personal willpower to abstain from a substance abuse issue seldom has long-term effect. It does happen, and I'm very grateful and thankful for the times that it does happen. But I'd have to say the trend is not a whole lot of success on changing people by their willpower. It takes a change of the heart.
Interesting. There was one theologian who's actually from this area. He died many years ago. His name was William Hendrickson, a New Testament theologian. But he used to say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And that's what you're talking about, right?
I guess I am. I don't claim to be a theologian or a poet, but
no. But the heart has to change the will.
I firmly believe that it takes a change of heart, and different individuals' hearts might be impacted or changed differently, but minus a real, sincere change of heart, long-term change in behavior is pretty difficult to achieve.
And we don't have a lot of time because we're just in a half-hour program here, and so I want to talk about this there. But in just a few words, what is justice?
Well, there's justice. Justice in kind of the is something just to begin with? Does it conform to the society standards? Is it fair? And then there's, and that's kind of the punitive side of our society. Is that punishment just considering the offense or the infraction? And then there's also, I believe, justice in how that is administered. Is it are people being treated fairly? Are they being treated appropriately based on their ability to conform to society? And so there's really two components to it. Is it a just action? And is the action taken in a fair way? Is it a fair action? And is it applied fairly?
What's the difference between justice and revenge?
Well, certainly, I think...
It's just not to interrupt.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you see all these movies out there, payback, revenge, and that the average person thinks about justice in terms of revenge. But that's not really what you're saying, is it?
No, I'm not saying revenge in the aspect of getting even. And I think revenge is probably a human reaction to a perceived injustice. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. Certainly, we can all feel violated by a particular act and have the feeling, I want to get even. Certainly that's not Christ-like. That's not the way we believe is appropriate to behave. But justice, from a punitive standpoint, certainly there has to be punishment for an infraction. Now, that punishment needs to be fair. It needs to meet the infraction. It needs to instigate change. It needs to be the motivation to make sure I don't do that act again. It needs to protect society so that these offenses don't occur that place society and our communities at risk. And I also think it has to provide a basis for victims to have an opportunity to start rebuilding their lives, to start the healing process. And I think that justly applied justice helps form that foundation for a victim to say, okay, that individual violated me in one way or another. That individual paid his or her due, and I can start the healing process.
Well, you bring up on the victims a very, very important issue that I want to talk about right after the break. Are victims in our current system adequately accounted for? We'll be right back after this.
The Center for Advanced Studies at Crossroad Bible Institute is sponsoring continuing education seminars for instructors and interested church members. These seminars cover a range of issues from restorative justice to responding to Islam. Seminars are open to everyone and free of charge, but advanced registration is required. To find a seminar in your area or to register for an upcoming seminar, go to cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. My name is David Schuringa, and I have in the studio with me today Sheriff Larry Stelma, who is the sheriff of Kent County, Michigan. And this is a big operation. I think, Larry, I think you said that you have 700 employees. It's a $70 million budget, 700 volunteers. This is a big operation to be in charge of.
It is a big operation. We have a lot of volunteers, and I think it's important that we almost have a 1-to-1 ratio of volunteers to officers, employee, and staff. And I think that shows the community acceptance of the organization, and I think that shows how interested the community is in affecting change in people's lives.
I'd like to talk more about that, volunteers and the community. But before the break, you had mentioned about the importance of victims. Now, you're the expert. I'm a theologian. You're the expert in criminology and so forth. But it strikes me that in our current system, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're starting to change it, but it strikes me in our current system, the victim is not getting their due all the time. And what I mean by that is it seems like once a person commits a crime and gets arrested, it becomes more of a crime against the state than a crime against that victim. And that victim's needs, the victim's almost not needed in this situation, except maybe for some evidence for the prosecutor. Am I exaggerating? Is this at all a correct perception?
Well, I certainly think that was the way the criminal justice system operated decades ago. Changing the system is like moving a slow-moving ship. It takes a long time.
Okay.
But I do think the trend to respect victims, to appreciate victims, to honor victims' rights has gained a lot of momentum in recent years, in the last decade, say. Certainly, former Senator Van Riggermorter was very active supporting victims' rights. Michigan has a victims' rights law, and those victims...
So they're not set aside as much now. They're more part of the process.
They are part of the process. They're involved not only in the prosecution, they're involved in the penalty phase. And each case is different. Each case is unique. But in most cases, the victims are allowed a victim impact statement at sentencing so that they can express their feelings. And quite frankly, it's really fair rewarding to see how many victims in that impact statement have started the healing process and claim, I don't hate you, and not in so many words. This is not verbatim. I'm not quoting anybody, but in so many words, they say, I don't hate you. I hate what you've done to my family. And I forgive you, and I trust you find forgiveness of yourself, or find a way to forgive yourself, or something to that effect. So I think the victims themselves are starting the healing process, and our society is becoming more and more in tune with the needs of the victims.
Has this been connected with the restorative justice movement, do you think?
I think it's independent from restorative justice.
Oh, no kidding.
I really do, yes. Restorative justice has in this community has not really taken off like it has in some communities, and
No
yet
kidding.
there's a tremendous victim victim acceptance and recognizing victims and their need in the system.
Because sometimes I've seen, or it seems like I've seen on television news and so forth, when the victim maybe is at the sentencing, they have a chance to say something, but it doesn't sound real restorative all the time. Sometimes it sounds like, vengeance, or you're getting what you deserved. Whereas it seems to me to be more healing for the victim to have another kind of controlled encounter to say, now here's how you hurt me, and to allow forgiveness rather than, yeah, you're gonna get it. Is that just pie in the sky?
I don't want to call it pie in the sky. Unfortunately, what we see and hear in the media are those horrendous crimes where any form of restorative justice is, for all practical purposes, out of the question. They're
right. You can't have a
major
personal
felonies
encounter.
and things of that sort. And those are the ones that perhaps the media overplays the vindictiveness.
That makes
about
news, right?
if it bleeds, it reads. But for the average offense, I think there's a whole different trend to it.
Ah, okay. When we talk about restorative justice or restorative, that brings to mind, back with the idea of justice, and we talked about revenge. In your definition of justice, it seemed to have elements of both. It seemed to have retribution. So there has to be sort of a payback or a compensation for the level of the crime, but then also, or am I reading something positive in there that shouldn't be positive? I mean by restorative in terms of changing the behavior. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that just the punishment itself will be a deterrent to change the behavior, or there's something in the punishment that can restore?
Well, I think both. I think if a person applies whatever is determined to be just in a manner for retribution, that's strictly punitive. Or if applying a penalty in a punitive manner is strictly retribution, and that's the only thing, I'm just going to do this to you to make sure I get even, I think that's counterproductive, and that's not going to result in anything. But by the same token, if you know that if you do this again, a certain action is going to happen, there is, historically, there is some prevention there. I'm not going to do that. I got a speeding ticket. Oh, I know I'm not going to speed through that community anymore. I hit this car going down the road because I wasn't paying attention, and it cost me $100 plus my deductible and points on my. I'm not going to do that anymore. So there is a punitive side to that, and I don't think that's necessarily retribution, but the punitive side to that has changed my behavior.
And does it? Let me just have some pushback on that.
I don't speed anymore.
I don't either, but I do get warnings, but I'm very grateful for that. But I don't speed anymore. But the fact that recidivism rates are 65 to 75%. So the punishments don't seem to be functioning very well as a deterrent.
Well, certainly recidivism is extremely high, unacceptably high, and is a huge issue for all those involved in the criminal justice system. I wouldn't say that just because recidivism is high, that's a direct relationship that the penalty is too severe or not severe enough. I think that recidivism in itself speaks that there are lots and lots of root problems here that need to be addressed. And to simply look at recidivism and say, I'm going to change recidivism by increasing the sentence or increasing the punitive side of justice, I think is counterproductive. It needs to take everything into consideration.
And so the retributive side of it is really just simply a matter of what is just. How does God want us to run justice and so forth, and it has those two elements of restoration and retribution.
Yes, and I think it needs to be a marriage of both, and then I think it needs to be applied in a just manner, recognizing the fact that the person is still an individual, still deserves dignity and respect, and still deserves my utmost attention to try to make or affect a long-term change.
After the break, I want to talk about, well, it's probably going to be a difficult issue, and that is, why does it seem like some demographics or some people experience law enforcement, at least they testify to experience law enforcement in some sharply different ways? And I'll explain what I mean by that, and we'll be right back.
Crossroad Bible Institute is a nonprofit organization that relies on financial donations from faithful supporters. These donations ensure that we will be able to continue offering services to people in prison to bring them the truth of God's Word. To make a tax-deductible donation or to find out more ways to help, please visit us at cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. My name is David Scheringa, and we have a special guest here today, Sheriff Larry Stelma, who is the sheriff of Kent County here in Michigan. And we've been talking about some interesting subjects. And in fact, at the break, we were just talking about, we're getting a little bit late, and you hope you didn't have to speed when you get back and stuff. But the sheriff probably, I don't know, maybe doesn't get many tickets, But a couple of things that come to mind with that. First of all, that people, I think, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but it strikes me that a policeman has a tremendous amount of power. And it's because it strikes me that when they stop you, as we're talking about that, in that situation, he's under no obligation to give you a ticket. So he can give you a warning, or he can say, have a nice day. He sort of, and I'm not saying, this just struck me that he seems to be prosecutor, judge, and jury at that moment.
Well, he's an accuser for certain. And they do have, officers do have a lot of authority and power when they effect a traffic stop.
Right.
But they also have a lot of discretion. And ultimately, officers have been taught, it's been a standard in the industry ever since I started, that the ultimate goal is to change a behavior. What are you going to do to change this?
They're thinking about that when they
behavior?
stop someone.
Yes.
Wow.
And that should be in the back of the officer's mind when they effect that traffic stop. How am I going to impress upon this individual that going 60 in a residential zone is not acceptable? And that's the motivation for the stop. But as far as jury and executioner, that still goes to the judicial system. It still goes to a magistrate or a judge or to a court.
But the average guy can't fight the ticket. The ticket's the ticket. You try to. Really, he's made the decision at that point.
Well, the officer's made the decision and has issued the citation. And but the system allows for people to go in and contest it, to tell the judge the extenuating circumstance. Had this going on, I had that going on, and oftentimes those extenuating circumstances might be taken into consideration by the magistrate in the severity of the justice that's handed out to the individual. So they do have options. They have options.
But now here comes a question that I wanted to lead to with this, because I was down in Nashville, Tennessee, and this maybe is no indicator of what's happening in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was a pastor's conference. Now, it turned out that I was the only Anglo pastor there, and the rest, all the other pastors, were African Americans. And as we discussed the law and stuff, I was just dumbfounded, because I realized that I experienced the law in a very different way than they experienced the law. And these are pastors, I've always seen policemen and the law as on my side, my protectors. And they watch out for my stuff. You know, when the policeman stops, it's an irritant if I get a ticket, but he's not a bad person. You know, he's not out to get me. But these other people from the poor side of town, oh my goodness, you know. And I found it, you know, they saw the officers and the police as the oppressor. The stories they told reminded me of my mother-in-law's stories as a teenager in Nazi-occupied Germany. How is that possible that in the same country, the same system, it seems like you can have two such extraordinarily different experiences of that? What's going on?
Well, certainly, I think that's a very real observation between different ethnic groups. Again, I think the causes of that are extremely complex and varied, stemming all the way from perceptions to reality on both sides. And I'm not indicating on either the law enforcement side or the civilian side. Perceptions to reality, family upbringing, family background, home, how you are, how you have been taught from the earliest age to respect or look at authority versus no respect for authority, whether that authority is in the home, in the school, or on the streets. It's a huge, complex issue, and I would not disagree for a moment that the perception is that way.
It's out there.
And on the same token, law enforcement for generations has been viewed as a friend of mine refers to it, knuckle-dragging headbusters. And that's not law enforcement in the 20th or the 21st century, but that's a image of law enforcement that is embedded in many people, especially ethnic varieties. That's all officers are. And while the officers have an issue or have an obligation to overcome that, and I think we are overcoming that by professionalism and education and training, I'm not sure the community is keeping up with us.
Well, it struck me that I can trace my family history back to the 1500s, and we've always been in a position of privilege in society. Whereas some of my brothers and sisters of the African American community, if they trace their history, go back to slavery, where you had perhaps not a consistent use of authority, and then the Jim Crow laws and so forth. And so when you have two totally different generational situations, that has a powerful impact. And what a tremendous challenge for a sheriff and for his deputies and so forth to function in those situations, so that we can see that, when we have people like you with your values, the police are there. This is not the enemy. Without them, life would be pretty chaotic. These are our friends, and they deserve our respect and so forth. But I guess they have to earn that respect too, I guess, among those who don't appreciate them.
It's a two-way street, and if the citizens rightly demand that officers have an open mind and be fair in their treatment, the citizens on the same token have an obligation to have an open mind and be fair and respectful too. And it's a two-way street.
It sure is. Well, we could talk about this for a long time and a lot of other subjects, but our time has quickly run out. Just thank you so much for what you do. And like I said, our instructors and so forth, we feel that we're on the same side with this, and we're all working for the same way. We want to see more people honoring God with their lives and being good citizens and loving their neighbors, and that's what it's all about. So thank you, Sheriff, for being here today. And we want to thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you again right here next week.